The government is spying on you and lying to you. Last week, the Home Office strictly told GB News there would be no migrants housed at the Britannia Hotel in London's Canary Wharf.
One of my producers here called the Home Office to check in because we, like many other people, were seeing social media posts of people at this hotel, and the rumours were that it was going to be used as a migrant hotel. And they basically categorically denied it to her. And then now it turns out that they are going to use it as an overflow facility for a migrant processing centre, which makes you wonder, why can't they just be honest with you?
Yeah, all right then. Surely we can trust the government, right? After all, it's their first priority to make sure British people, you and me, are safe. Well, take a look at this. This is the scene from the Britannia last night, where hundreds of small boat migrants were bussed into the hotel under the cover of darkness. And let's take a good look at the clientele, shall we? Men, all fighting age men, not a woman or child in sight. The time was around 1 a.m. Why did the Home Office move these men into the Britannia at 1 a.m? What kind of time is that? Some may think it was done deliberately, perhaps, to ensure it went without anybody noticing. And by the way, the government's doing this at the very same time they're censoring migrant hotel footage on social media under the Online Safety Act. And what's even worse is they're doing it at the same time of setting up a so-called elite Home Office department to monitor social media looking for critics of migrant hotels. I think just so they can grass you up to social media companies and ask them to ban your accounts. So, as I said, the government is literally spying on you at the same time as lying to you. But what does this kind of contempt towards the electorate create? Well, it creates anger, worry, concern, and distrust of authority. Distrust of the very people meant to have our best interests at heart. So while this was going on at the Britannia last night, today I went down to another migrant hotel at London's Barbican, where there have been dozens of arrests and charges in recent months for a range of alleged crimes linked to hotel migrants staying there. This woman I'm about to show you now is called Tony, and she told me why her community wanted the hotel shut down.
Here today?
Because I live in the local community and I'm concerned over my children's safety. I'm concerned about my old age pensioners who can't come into the local square, where we've always communed. This is our cafe.
So this is the square here. Just tell us, describe for viewers what's here, what's around here.
The fish and chip shop. They also, that's our George, and he opened a restaurant that's gone completely down the hill because obviously it was a thriving hotel at one stage. Now, as we know, it's besieged.
So that's a great point. So because there's no genuine guests there's no tourists staying here, the local businesses are losing out because people aren't eating, people aren't going to the restaurants.
In the parks anymore, but you can't. How can you play with your kids on a paddling pool when you've got 4 or 5 men that you don't know, glaring at you? They're disrespectful. They've got a different ideology.
Tony, I've been with the Antifa stand up to racism lot in the past couple of hours.
They're not local.
Well, no, they've been bussed in, and also they're fully masked. But they're calling you lot racist. They're calling you lot bigoted. What's your response?
We're a diverse community, so how can they call us racist? And I don't like the fact that these people are coming into our community, telling us what we've got to put up with, and it's our kids' children's safety that's paramount.
Yeah, well said. Well, I kept mingling, and another man I came across had a few choice words for our dear Prime Minister.
Why is it Keir Starmer continues to basically close his ears to the working people of this country who are telling them in no uncertain terms, we do not want these people in and around our children. We know the crime statistics. We know what's happening in our country here. What is wrong with them? Why are these politicians deaf and not hearing?
Later on, I popped over to the so-called anti-racism contingent and we spotted migrants smiling and laughing at the commotion below from their hotel window. Here they are on your screen now if you're watching on television. Some were waving. I saw others dancing along to the music being blasted out by the so-called anti-racism protesters below. Others I saw were throwing their hands in the air and having a jolly good time before I guess they were asked to move on to stop provoking the crowds below. Soon after, I was surprised to see far-left militant Antifa rock up in full face masks, their identities hidden from full view. Let's have a quick look. This is them. This is the footage I recorded on my phone. Antifa, if you're not aware of who they are, it means anti-fascist. But in truth, I'd argue they are the biggest fascists going. They're a global organisation. They're often spotted in the United States, who are routinely violent, very organised and totally brainwashed by an ideology that wants to destroy capitalism and, indeed, democracy in the West. They censor free speech and call anybody they disagree with a Nazi. Of course they do. The truth is, the most trouble today came from Antifa down in London, who grappled with police, threw missiles and bottles at officers as the coppers tried to control crowds. Interestingly, they were allowed to keep their face masks on as well, unlike other protests such as the Bell Hotel in Epping last weekend. I was there, where police enforced an order for people to remove all face coverings. In fact, I saw people get nicked because they refused to take their masks off. So despite Antifa's intimidation, this is the moment, and this is iconic, this is the moment a brave British woman stood defiantly in front of a masked Antifa mob and stood her ground in the face of being called a racist Nazi.
It's the personification of Britain at the moment. A lone British woman, you know, by herself, defiantly holding up a Union Jack flag against a sea of Antifa masked protesters. Why are you standing there so defiantly? Are you not intimidated by this lot? Why do you feel so strongly you have to stand here and hold the Union Jack aloft?
My children.
You fear for their future? What do you think of this lot turning up with their face masks?
Stop.
Okay.
No mask.
Well done, that woman. I tried to find her in the crowd afterwards to try and get her on the show tonight, but I lost her in the melee. But I'd argue she speaks for a lot of the country right now. But sticking with Antifa, who and what are they? What are they doing at protests organised by worried Londoners who are concerned about illegal migrants and migrant hotels? Well, my next guest spotted these posters dotted all around London in the days leading up to today. Let's take a look. It reads, "Kick the racists out of London. Assemble at 2 p.m. Call out by Central London anti-fascist." That is an Antifa poster. Those were spotted by the New York Times bestselling author Andy Ngo, a man who's had his own fair share of skirmishes with Antifa in recent years, particularly in the US. He's the author of Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy, which is, by the way, available at all good bookstores, of course, and online. And I'm pleased to say Andy joins me now. Andy, good evening. Thank you for your company. I wanted to speak with you about Antifa particularly because, as I just mentioned, you've had, as I describe it, your fair share of run-ins with them. Can you just explain for the British audience, who are Antifa, where are they from, what are their intentions, who funds them, if you know? What's your thoughts?
Antifa is a violent far left movement, and they are decentralized in how they are generally organized. So you can think of their structure as actually very similar to how jihadist movements organize, in that you can have formalized groups that have names, and then you can have those who are radicalized to the individual level based on the propaganda that is put out into the ether, the internet, or the public. And you just showed some of the propaganda in the flyers. It is relentless. It's in person, it's online, it's through some of the institutions as well. And in terms of their ideology, they claim to be anti-fascist. But if you looked at some of the signs that were at the direct action that they held today outside that hotel, one of them was "Smash fascism, open the borders." No states, no borders. The ideology is anti-civilization. They are anti-British, anti-America, and anti-Western civilization. They want to see the destruction of nation states. And they know, as well as even those who are protesting on the opposite side, that mass migration on this type of scale in a welfare state is destabilizing and can push the state to a breaking point, which is what they want. They want to see the downfall of capitalism, of social structures. And so in the masking, which you recorded in some of those great videos, is intentional. They tell their militant comrades to come out and do that, one, to be intimidating, and two, when given the opportunity to commit crimes and to be able to get away with it. They weren't able to carry out a lot of violence today because of the overwhelming force of the police presence.
Yeah, they are intimidating, especially wearing military-style balaclavas. When they first rolled up, so just to give you some colour, you had the Stand Up to Racism protesters, who I argue were the sort of socialist lot with their pre-made placards. They were in one side of the protest. And then suddenly the Antifa lot came down from a completely separate part of the city, all together, nicely organised, but all masked. And there was a couple of, as I described, military-style balaclavas being branded. One guy in particular, I guess he recognised me from the show, from the channel. He stood and stared at me for around, I'd say, a minute and a half. Didn't say anything. I didn't want to engage particularly with his eye vision, but I knew he was staring at me and trying to intimidate me. Why do they mask up? And also, what is their potential for violence? Because I know that you've had physical interactions with Antifa in the US, right, Andy?
Yes, unfortunately, I've been beaten by them several times in the course of my reporting in Portland, Oregon, where they're very active in the United States. So the masking serves a number of functions, but one, intimidation, but two, primarily so that they can evade being identified by law enforcement or members of the public. So after I was beaten, for example, law enforcement said that they couldn't identify my assailants because conveniently they were all masked in those balaclava types of face coverings. I just want to emphasize that today I think we didn't see mass brawls because of the presence of the police. That is a big difference between my country and yours, in that police in London keep demonstrators separated. I would not be surprised if within the backpacks of some of those militants that they came ready with weapons, because that is also something they instruct their members to do.
Wow, that's pretty chilling to hear, Andy, quite frankly. Just finally, does it concern you, I know you're from the US, does it concern you to see Antifa now rocking up to these events in London, these protests, not just London, all across the country, because lots of these protests have started with very honest intentions from concerned mums and dads. They've had maybe a child assaulted in their area by a hotel migrant. Does it concern you that we're now getting to the point where Antifa are rocking up?
It concerns me because a lot of the members of the public can be easily misled by the propaganda. In the flyers they put out, the Antifa and their allies will call their opposition racist and fascist. And all you have to do in places like London and Manchester and other cities is to use that type of inflammatory rhetoric and lies to get people showed up, angry and ready for a fight.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Andy, thank you so much. I really appreciate your company this evening. You are, of course, the senior editor at the Post Millennial and author of that great book, Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Let's hope they don't succeed, eh? Andy, thank you very much. Have a good evening and the rest of your weekend. Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel now. The former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards, the former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Bleksley, who I'm sure will have plenty to say on this, and the journalist and broadcaster, Linda Jubilee. Welcome along, panel. Good. Once again, another week, I'm saying I'm thankful to be in the safety of the studio with you guys. Peter, I'll start with you as the ex-copper. What's your take on what we saw today? And also, my concern is the sort of arrival of Antifa at these events.
More broadly, a sleeping giant has been stirred by all of this. And that sleeping giant is the moderate mainstream of Britain, who every 4 or 5 years ago, the most political thing they would do is put an X in a box on a ballot paper. Yeah. We have reached a tipping point. Now those people who pay their taxes, who are law-abiding, who raise great children, who contribute to this once great nation, they are awakened to the downfall, the decline, and quite frankly, the hellhole that we are heading towards in this country. And they will mobilise. When I say mobilise, they have considerable financial clout.
Yeah, who funds them?
No, I'm talking about the giant that's been awoken, right. The moderate mainstream of Britain here. They have financial clout. What's the point in leaving your home, if you're lucky enough to own one, to your children, only for them to live in a country of decline, decline, decline? The moderate mainstream of Britain are waking up to all of this. And when they mobilise, inherently peacefully, but in huge, huge numbers, this lamentable government will get the shock of its life, and we will inch towards Britain once again becoming the nation that it should be.
Well, I appreciate your optimism. I've got similar thoughts. I think maybe in the next couple of years you're going to get people who previously weren't engaged in the news or politics. I've said it before so many times, like a broken record, who will start to notice that something's not quite right. And they'll start getting engaged, as you say. People who before wouldn't even follow the news or any shows like this or look at the, migrant numbers or whatever. I think, as you said, there's a sleeping giant at play here. Linda, what's your take on all this?
I think as well, and I think I've mentioned this before, that I worked in at least half a dozen hotels, mostly with evacuees from Afghanistan, which launching an English language programme. But inevitably, I came into contact with asylum seekers. And what I saw was a growing problem. And as Peter has rightly pointed out, the public slowly at that point became aware that there were many of these hotels in their area. They were all over West London, particularly round by Heathrow Airport. And really, I didn't believe the extent of it until I actually worked in those hotels. But what distresses me is that, you turn and you look at footage shot on the streets of London today, and it looks like a total mess. And Peter is completely right in saying that moderate people now are becoming terribly concerned. And I feel concerned sometimes. But you know what? There's another group of people that I think no one really mentions. And that's the group of people who are here legally as migrants, who contribute enormously to this country, some of whom have now held very senior posts in running this country, but actually are also scared themselves because they're worried about being tarred with the same brush.
Yeah. They are part of the moderate mainstream that I speak of.
Exactly.
The immigrants that came here 50, 60 years ago that run the businesses,
or
who have contributed,
recently,
who have raised great children that are friends of our children and grandchildren. There is a mobilisation of millions of people in Britain who are quite frankly saying
they've had enough.
Yeah, they're sick of
enough.
it. Paul, first of all, your take, but then I want to ask you as well about the Britannia Hotel situation. The Home Office said to Patrick Christie's show last week, we are not putting migrants in that hotel. They bust them in overnight last night. So maybe address that first and then we'll get your thoughts on generally today.
Well, in government communications, the basic rule is, do not tell lies to journalists because you will always be found out, right? So either somebody misspoke because they didn't have the information or they, the line changed when they spoke and then they did bust them in anyway. But either way, you just don't do that. You have to tell the truth. Otherwise, you do get found out, which is what's just
to clarify,
happened.
we haven't had confirmation they are migrants at the hotel, but look, we're not stupid.
Well, I mean, you've got to be careful when you're briefing journalists, and that's the thing I used to do for a living. On these demos, I don't take quite the apocalyptic line that my fellow panellists have done. I think a lot of people like turning up for a punch-up, and it's a bit sort of mods v rockers, this. There are people on the right and on the left who like to turn up and have a bit of a ruck. It's all good after all. And I think, and just the anatomy of the far left you were describing there, there have always been these idiots who describe themselves as anarchists who will turn up. They used to be called the Black Bloc in black clothes and with the masks and all that. They're the dudes that smashed up Fortnum and Masons a few years ago, you remember? And when they were arrested, they turned out to be public school boys, just idiots dressing up and cosplaying.
I don't think
and
this is the
same. It is. It's the same idiots. And then the stand-up to racism people. Well, that's the Socialist Workers' Party.
Paul, these Antifa lot aren't just sort of middle-class people going down for a bit of a time. They're not. They are vicious. We heard from Andy No that. Andy No is a worldwide reputable commentator on this. He was beaten up by Antifa, hospitalised in Oregon.
Not in the UK.
No, but this is Antifa. It's a global organisation. They call themselves anti-fascist people.
My vision is not apocalyptic. My vision, which happens to be the truth, is optimistic. The mainstream, the moderate mainstream of Britain has been woken up by this lamentable lying government, and it will mobilise both on the streets peacefully, democratically at the ballot box, with its vast wealth that collectively it owns, from the plumber to the train driver to the bus driver to the police officer when they're off duty and they speak secretly, to all of these millions of people. They are saying enough.
Yeah, Peter, lots of viewers agreeing with you. Somebody said, Peter Blexley, you're absolutely spot on. Somebody else said, hear, hear, Peter, I will join a peaceful protest. Yeah, lots of viewers agreeing with you. Panel, thank you very much. We're short for time because we had Andy. I need to read some statements as well. We contacted the Home Office this evening. They stated that due to safety and security concerns, they can't confirm whether migrants are being housed in hotels, of course. They also said they were unable to comment on operational matters in reference to whether migrants were transported to the Britannia at Canary Wharf to the hotel at 1 a.m. A spokesperson for Tower Hamlets Council said, "We are aware of the government's decision to use the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf to provide temporary accommodation for asylum seekers. It's important that the government ensures that there is full packages of support for those staying at the hotel. We're working with the Home Office and partners to make sure that all necessary safety and safeguarding arrangements are in place." And in response to the Whitehall spy reports, a government spokesperson said, "Free speech is a cornerstone of our democracy. The Online Safety Act protects it. Platforms have a duty to uphold freedom of expression, and the Act places no curbs whatsoever on what adults can say and see on the internet." Unless it's something that would be already illegal offline. The government has no role in deciding what actions platforms can take on legal content for adults. That is a matter for them according to their own rules. There we go. Let us know what you think. gvnews.com/your say.